Up next, it's the Soundcheck Podcast. Please hold. Your ears are very important to us. Please hold on, and our program will begin shortly. The Soundcheck Podcast is coming up. Please continue to hold. Keep up with the Soundcheck Podcast and everything that's happening in the New Sounds empire. Just go to newsounds.org and follow us on social media. All of the icons are in the top right corner of the page. All of our other musicians are currently playing for other customers. Please stay with us, and someone will play for you in just a moment. From newsounds.org, it's time for another live studio performance in our Soundcheck podcast series, streaming live on YouTube and Facebook. I'm John Schaefer. We first got to know Qasim Naqvi as the drummer in the band Dawn of Midi, a group that created a kind of almost electronic dance or trance music without using electronics at all, just piano, bass, and drums. Since then, Qasim has done a number of solo projects, doing everything from works for chorus and orchestra to electronic pieces. His latest album is called Teenages, and it consists of music played on a modular analog synthesizer that Qasim has spent years building himself. That instrument is now here in our studio, and Qasim Naqvi is here to play it with a live improvisation to get us started. A live improvisation by Qasim Naqvi, performing on his modular analog synthesizer here in our studio. And when I say performing, Qasim, first of all, it's great to see you again. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
When I say performing live electronics, people expect to see a keyboard. There is no keyboard here except for the QWERTY keyboard on your laptop.
Yes.
But so this analog synthesizer, it's a set of modules, right?
Yes, it's a in this particular instance, it's a set of modules. And actually, I should make a correction, and this is potentially a PR sort of mistake. But this synthesizer, I didn't build this synthesizer from scratch. Like the way this sort of system works is that you assemble a system and you sort of buy things from different manufacturers based on the type of sound that
right. So when this is not a synthesizer that comes as a keyboard with a bunch of preloaded sounds.
Yes, exactly.
So to that extent, your PR stuff is correct.
It is, yeah. And not my PR, but it's actually, I think I had explained it sort of perhaps a little loosely, but yeah, it's a system that you sort of assemble based on usually with keyboards, everything comes inside the box,
right.
In this sort of proprietary sort of case. And but in the case of a modular system, you can buy those things in pieces and assemble it as sort of you see fit.
And what's the attraction? What's the advantage of using this kind of pre-digital, this analog technology when you could have stuff that would take you half the time to set up, not require all the little patch cords that are in front of you? Why do it this way? Well,
I've spent many years as a drummer and an improviser, and lately I've also, I've been getting into writing for, chamber groups and orchestras and things like that. So this concept of acoustic music has been in my sort of blood for a very long time. And for me, the modular synthesizer, the way it is designed and the sound of it and the way it behaves, and the process of which you sort of have to learn how to get the thing to speak, it seemed like the most natural progression forward from the acoustic realm into the electronic. I mean, this makes quote unquote electronic music, but I really also see it as an electrical instrument, and the way that it behaves. There's kind of an instability to it, and there's just something in the sound of it that reminds me of unamplified acoustic instruments.
So it behaves like an acoustic instrument, a digital, synthesizer. You press a button, you can be sure that tone is going to be there every time.
Yeah.
Here, I guess, will the tones? I mean, in the old days, they would drift, sometimes a lot.
Oh, absolutely, they drift all the time. Actually, that's why I showed up 2 hours early, because you have to tune the oscillators, which is also, as you'll hear in this piece, Teenagers, which is it's a very sort of tonal kind of piece of music, and there's all this kind of triadic stuff, and but it all starts to kind of drift as the piece sort of progresses, as you'll hear. But
so there's a human fallibility to this machine.
Absolutely, yeah, and I guess again, like you were saying, you can't just turn it on like a normal keyboard and hit a marimba button. If you turn this thing on with nothing plugged in, it doesn't make any noise whatsoever. So there's a technique to it. You have to learn how this thing of sort of sending voltages and attenuating voltages and all this stuff, how that works to get the instrument to sound like a violin or any instrument. Yeah.
Now, one of the other things that has come up in the world of digital electronic music is the ease with which you can create rhythm. You can program a rhythm, sometimes very complex rhythms, and with a press of a button, again, there it is. how do you create, because all over the pieces in Teenagers, you have moments where a kind of soundscape suddenly begins to become rhythmic. So how do you do that?
So basically there's one module on this system that's called Maths. It's by this company called Make Noise, and it's an envelope generator. And basically what an envelope does is, with these oscillators, they're on. Once the system is on, they're making noise the entire time. So you need some kind of a device that gives the sound a
shape.
An attack, a decay, sustain, all that stuff. And that's basically what an envelope generator does. So in Teenagers, I'm basically using these envelopes to create these attacks and decays of varying lengths, and it almost sounds like you're sort of cutting the audio up into slivers, but it's just it's like you're basically creating this super fast attack and decay that's going it's basically moving at this, and then you can control the speed of that envelope. You can slow down, and then if you have two envelopes going at the same time, then you can create these interesting polyrhythms, things like that.
So in that improvisation, there was the moment where the kind of the pulse slowed down.
Well, actually, I wasn't using that for the improvisation. That was just the oscillators sort of on. What I was doing is I was using, if we can get into the nerdy side of it.
If you can't get nerdy on this show, Qasim,
I don't know.
Where can you?
We're sure. But yeah, basically there's I was just using a very simple thing of just playing like an F drone, and I had 2 out of 4 of the oscillators on. And one of the oscillators is a complex oscillator, and what that is it's made up of 2 oscillators. And one oscillator is modulating the frequency of another oscillator. So I don't know if you can. Maybe we can hear something real quick.
Yeah,
I
sure.
can do a demonstration. So this is amplitude modulation,
or AM as we call it.
Yeah, exactly.
In the radio business.
So you have
AM radio.
You have one oscillator that's moving at a very slow rate now, almost like a LFO, and it's controlling the amplitude of.
And an LFO is.
An LFO is an LFO is a low frequency oscillator, and basically it's an oscillator that it oscillates at around, I think, 20 hertz or below, so it's below the threshold of human hearing. But you can use the shape of that oscillator to control different things in the system, like tremolo or, in this case, amplitude. So this thing is doing amplitude. This is frequency modulation.
Again, in the radio business, we call that FM.
FM. And so on and so forth. So that's kind of, I was just messing around with that. It was very simple. I was doing just kind of laying off the thing and just doing very simple stuff.
Now, the title track of Teenagers, first of all, it's not Teenagers, it's Teenagers.
No, it's Teenagers, yeah.
So is this an album about this instrument sort of reaching some state of maturity?
Yeah.
And maybe being the rebellious teenage synthesizer. Does it have a mind of its own? Does it surprise you?
Yeah, I mean, that is essentially what the title of the album is about. I mean, the larger concept of the record was sort of, building this system from just 1 or 2 modules and making as much music as possible with those combinations, and then I would introduce another module and see how those things would sort of communicate with each other, and up until the point where we have this kind of big, robust sort of thing. And this is the system that Teenagers was made on. But all of the other and the track order is chronological, with the exception of the first piece, which was actually the intermission. It's titled Intermission, but it was at the point where half of this, like when the Death Star is sort of like half. There's like holes in it, and so I wanted to chronicle the kind of growth of this instrument and also my sort of learning and understanding of it as I built it over time, and I just tried to map its sort of output, and that ended up kind of being the record, and also the kind of the concept of the record and the title.
Okay. Do you feel that as a drummer, a longtime drummer, you approach composition different? I know I'm treading perilously close to the drummers aren't real musicians trope here.
They're not. I'm just kidding.
But do you have a more, would you think you have a more rhythmically based or percussive inner ear to bring to the electronic world?
I don't know. I mean, it's funny. A lot of the sort of chamber music, and I don't want to call it classical music, but that type of that type of music that I write has, a lot of it has been sort of ambient and absent from rhythm. And in this, the album Teenagers, I guess, is sort of me trying to get closer to the rhythmic side of my thinking. And I hope to kind of further that along more as I play more with this, learn more about the synthesizer.
All right.
I mean, it's very easy to, to just have a sequencer sort of set up, and then it just clocks and divides things in this kind of mechanical way. And I personally kind of want to veer away from that, and,
All right. So Teenagers, to the extent that this instrument is capable of repeating a piece the same way twice, this is a repeatable experience, right? It's a scored piece. You know what all the signposts are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, what I did is when the system was built and I had this sort of polyphonic, I was able to play polyphonically. I got invited to play at the LPR, their 10th anniversary thing last year, and so I had to make a piece of music. So I sat at the piano and just very quickly sort of came up with this simple piece, and then I just fed it into the modular, and it gave me Teenagers, and I just had record enable set up, and then I listened back and I was like, oh, okay. This is, I mean, this is just a very basic sort of thing I wrote in like an hour, and then this machine turned it into something else.
Cool. You want to play it for us?
Yeah, let's do it.
Qasim Naqvi is my guest here in the studio. Speaking of LPR, he will be playing there on Saturday, August 17th. It's the South Asian Union Voltage Experiment with Aruj Aftab and Rafiq Bhatia, Shahzad Ismaili, and Qasim himself. But at the moment, he's here with his modular analog synthesizer. Here is the title track from his recent album called Teenagers. That is Qasim Naqvi live here in our studio, and a performance of Teenages. That is the title track from his record of the same name, played on this modular analog synthesizer. And so you told us, Qasim, before playing it, that you wrote the piece at the piano and then fed it into this device. So what did it sound like on the piano? Was it just a set of chords, or?
Yeah, like the excuse me, the beginning is kind of like it's just this kind of tonal sort of chordal progression, and then it moves from, I guess, kind of like a chorale almost, and then it kind of moves from that into almost like a literal kind of canon, which is that there's that middle section where it's this cascading melody that's sort of going down. So I just basically like wrote that and then just sort of, and brought it back in second, third, and fourth voice, sort of
all moving in canon with each other.
All moving in canon with each other, yeah. And then that's one section, and then at the end it kind of goes back to this again, like these kind of like almost like a chorale.
And I mean, this is a different version from what's on the record.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It always changes.
Right. So it is a composed piece, but the live performance does bring an element of, creativity in the moment.
Yes.
And feeding it into the synthesizer sounds so simple. I let the synthesizer create the piece, but in fact, you're constantly shaping the sound.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the performance aspect of it.
Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, you because like I mentioned, these oscillators they never quiet down, so
right.
you have to give them shape and sort of purpose. I mean, the thing that I really like about the modular is that, it's almost like you have this very strange ensemble of instruments in front of you, and
you're conducting them.
You're conducting them, and the way that you sort of patch and send voltages from one module to another, which is determining things that there's decisions that they're making in terms of sound and rhythm and time, periodicity, and all that. It very much feels like an act of orchestration, like the way that you sort of patch these things together. And it's different. That makes it kind of different from performance to performance. Like kind of like an ensemble when they perform.
But it's interesting the way you phrase that suggests that the machine is somehow making some decisions.
Yeah, it is, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to, like, for instance, there are things where the pitch starts to sort of drift. There are, in terms of how like a certain sort of filter is behaving, which kind of also gives the sound shape, or a ring modulator, or how this like, this 10-band EQ it's tuned in sevenths instead of octaves, the each band. All these things will just always sound a little different when you turn the machine on. Like this performance I did today, like I was practicing it yesterday and it sounded completely different. Then
Is this music in just intonation?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, maybe it is
in passing,
unintentionally.
Yeah,
but there's no. It's impossible actually with this system that I have to deal with ratios of that sort of just intonation stuff. You can't. It's impossible to do it. And for things to stay in pitch.
Right. But you are freed of the 12 notes of the Western scale because you can program anything into this.
Yeah, exactly. You just can't. I guess you can't expect that same sort of scientific kind of
the purity of the intervals.
Yeah. It'll sound more like a drunk, or someone who's the psilocybin is slowly setting in, and
or wearing off.
Yeah, probably more the latter.
Qasim, where did you spend your teenage years? Was it here in America, or?
Yeah, I was born in Litchfield County, Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
In a very small rural farm town, and I was raised there until I graduated high school, and then my entire family, we all left and moved to. I went to college in New York, and then my family relocated to Westchester.
Okay.
But my brother was a college student at NYU in the 90s, early 90s, and I used to come and visit him, and I would go to the Old Knitting Factory all the time and see concerts, and so New York is a part of my blood.
Yeah. And Dawn of Midi, Brooklyn-based, hasn't been so active lately.
Mm-hmm.
You've been doing this, and Amina's been playing with Inov Gnawa, the Moroccan-based band. Is Dawn of Midi still a thing?
I don't know. I mean, that record was it was such an intense process of making that piece. Dysnomia, you know, as amazing and as powerful as it is, I think it definitely took a lot out of us, and also just in terms of touring the thing as much as we did. You know, we played the piece like, I don't know, more than 800 times.
Wow.
You know, or something. That maybe a little less than that, but so I think right now we're just enjoying sort of working on our own stuff, and you know, it's hard to think of something that could be better than that that record. But also I think we're just enjoying just working on our own stuff, and also, you know, just not having to make decisions on committee, you know, like just do our own thing for a minute.
So you feel like you're making enough decisions that the machine can still have its little say-so every now and again.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've been speaking with Qasim Naqvi. The album is called Teenagers, and he's been playing some of it for us here, actually the epic title track for us here in the studio today. On Saturday, August 17th, he'll be playing at Le Poisson Rouge on a bill that also includes Rafik Bhatia and Arouj Aftab and Shahzad Ismaili and a number of others. Qasim, great to see you again. Thank you so much for coming and playing for us today.
Great to see you. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great.
This is Soundcheck.